If you believe the answer is within an arm's reach, it is. Let me explain what I mean here. This is the closest I've come to in years of getting into kind of a back and forth on social media, on Instagram. But I thought, let's not go down that road. Take a walk. Think about it. Play pros and cons with your point of view and see if in an hour, hour and a half, you still feel the same way. And I took my walk and I came back and I can tell you that I absolutely, unequivocally still feel the same way. And I want to dive into it with you. See, anytime you talk about making the most of what you have, anytime you talk about not being a victim, anytime you talk about always blaming yourself because no one else can fix your life, there's this sort of subtle, unspoken unease. It's hard to almost articulate. How can you tell people in adverse situations to go figure it out, right? Have faith. Go pick up the pieces along the way. You don't know what they've been through. You have no idea, right? There are some people out there in immense pain and suffering. Who are you to advocate for internal strength in an unfair world? Which was basically the crux of that Instagram comment that prompted me to grab the mic and yap a little bit. And in its own unique way, I think it's correct. There's merit to that, right? There's a misfortune that I just can't and don't understand. Look, I grew up and live in the West. The most difficult decision I made today was, do I make my own coffee or do I go to Starbucks? I'm just being real with you. I've always had running water. I have access to food and shelter. I grew up in a middle-class family in the suburbs of LA and then Boston. 2 parents in the home. Always had lunch in my lunchbox going to school. I'm relatively healthy, right? Minus the occasional injury or headache. I don't know what it's like to open my eyes and hope I feel well enough to function that day. That's suffering that I cannot relate to. But I know that regardless of one's pain, this has to be true, right? A choice must be made. Perhaps the most important decision one is presented with, that we are all during those times presented with. And to frame it, I'll start with a quote from Viktor Frankl. He says, to draw an analogy, a man's suffering is similar to the behavior of gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into an empty chamber, it will fill the chamber completely and evenly, no matter how big the chamber. Thus, suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore, the size of human suffering is absolutely relative. What he's saying there is that even though our suffering is not quote-unquote equal, and it's certainly not, in our own lives, in our own world, it feels the same, right? Which is a strange thing to even entertain, right? That my suffering or your suffering feels the same as Jeff Bezos' suffering. It's like, how, right? They're vastly different problems, different pains. So I think, long story short, comparing is a fool's errand. We're not here to be judges of who's hurting more or why. No, I think the message is much simpler. When we're in those moments of pain, or look, maybe it's not even moments, maybe it's a continuation, right? For years, someone's been fighting or weren't given a great start. They don't have financial resources, family, friends not around, sick, you name it, right? There are a million things we go through. Question is, do you point out with anger Or do you point in with hope? Do you look to transfer your pain to others or use your internal strength to build what was once not there? And this is the message, by the way, that I've pondered and contemplated over and over and over again. It doesn't matter how I slice it and dice it, that's where I land, right? It's never beneficial to blame. Just like it's always detrimental when others clap along with you like baby seals while you're dodging accountability. It never helps for someone to say, hey, this isn't your problem. This is beyond you. You're helpless. Let's be mad together. Hey, we weren't dealt a good hand. I'm sorry. That's the way it is. Right? That in the short term might feel good because you don't have to fix the problem. You can remove accountability. But in the long term, you are hurting yourself. You are disempowering yourself, disarming yourself. Removing the one thing that can change your life, and that's personal agency. Again, when you're at that rock bottom, you have two options: own it or blame, period. And you can hear that and think, what? It's not my fault he walked out of my life. Hey, I certainly didn't give myself this health problem. Hey, I didn't pick to be born or grow up in this neighborhood. True, check. This is not about blame and has nothing to do with blame. It has everything to do with ownership, with empowering yourself. This is about saying, I didn't put myself here, but I sure as hell can take myself there. Not enough people are comfortable with that message, right? From every corner of life, you get the opposite, right? You have politicians saying, hey, son, the deck is stacked against you. You're powerless, but hey, vote for me and I'll help. You have, the media, you have TV showing you tragedy after tragedy, pointing fingers, blaming others, right? Let's make sure people live in fear so they have no control over their own destinations, so they feel small and helpless in a world that's bigger than them. You have social media algorithms, right? Positioning victimhood as currency. Hey, look how marginalized I am. Poor me, right, guys? Clicks, retweets, likes. That's the magic. This way of looking at the world is destroying us. It's destroying us personally. It's destroying our communities. It's destroying the fabric of society, right? You can't have a functioning society with no personal agency or individual accountability. There's just no foundation to build on. Everything starts with the individual. Everything. As the saying goes, no one is coming to save you. No one's coming to fix all your problems, even the ones you didn't create. No one's going to fix a cycle of poverty or crime or obesity. You have to want that. Now, is that complex? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not delusional enough to think that I can solve these things on a microphone. I'm not. But what I can tell you is I see its complexity the same way I see a car is complex. I can't put a car together. There's thousands of parts. But I can tell you with conviction that car is not going anywhere without the engine or motor. Just like your willingness to own the situation, your personal situation, your agency is the engine or motor in your life. You go nowhere without it. There is no vehicle without that ownership. In other words, everything revolves around that phrase, what can I personally do about it? So when you're frustrated with the current moment, or the pieces you were given. And trust me, I can empathize, man. Life is unfair. It's brutally unfair. Remember those two options. I mean, point out, blame, and beg to be saved. Or you can point in and find a way to capture light in darkness. Anytime you want to transfer accountability, you are a thief robbing yourself of your own strength. Anytime someone tells you that the world is the problem and not you, they are a distraction pointing you away from the North Star you need to follow. If you believe the answer is within an arm's reach, you are correct. Because you are that answer.